All Indiana Politics is your premier source for Indiana politics, focusing on issues that matter to you.
I still want us to be the best in the Midwest.
We can't afford another lockdown.
Give the citizens of this country the relief they need.
Education in the state of Indiana remains priority number one.
In-depth, nonpartisan coverage.
We don't know exactly where the economy will be in January.
People are worried with good reason.
Exclusive interviews with Indiana's political leaders.
We have the resources here in the state of Indiana to care for those who are in need.
Expert analysis on critical legislation.
We need to reform those laws.
This recovery is going to take some time.
We've got to anticipate that there'll be a budget shortfall.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome to another edition of All Indiana Politics. I'm Phil Sanchez. It's up to you who will succeed Mike Braun in the U.S. Senate. Braun could have run for a second term this year. Instead, he's running for governor. Republican Congressman Jim Banks launched his campaign for Senate nearly 2 years ago. He faces Democrat Dr. Valerie McCray, a clinical psychologist, and longtime Libertarian Andrew Horning. All three candidates sat down with our government reporter Garrett Bergquist. We begin with Jim Banks.
Well, it's a big opportunity for our state, the opportunity to be a senator for the whole state. I've had the privilege of representing Northeast Indiana, my hometown, Columbia City, the Fort Wayne area district the last 8 years. But when Mike Braun announced that he was running for governor, it opened the Senate seat. There's so much more that I can do for my home state as a United States Senator, and that's what I'm looking forward to doing. I serve on the Armed Services Committee, I serve on the Education Committee, and I serve on the new Select Committee on China in the House. My priorities won't be different, but being one of 100 and having a bigger platform and voice in the Congress as a senator means I can get more done for Indiana.
The economy is playing a big role in this election, and specifically inflation and housing. What are your plans for those two issues?
Every 100 days, we add $1 trillion to the national debt at the spending levels that we're on. It's why I voted against the short-term continuing resolution last week, because it continues to spend at those levels and continues to drive us further into debt. My kids are 15, 13, and 11 years old, and they will be directly affected by what is now a $35 trillion national debt on a path to $50 trillion in 10 years or a little bit more if we keep spending at those levels. And that directly contributes to inflation. I mean, keep in mind as well that we spend more on paying interest on the national debt today than we do on the entire budget of the Pentagon. So think about what that added nearly $1 trillion a year that we pay on the interest of the debt could do to build more schools, to build more roads in the United States, let alone to contribute to our national security. And it's being spent on the interest of our debt. So this is a crisis for our country. We have to get it under control. Now, in the Senate, I will continue to be a voice for fiscal conservatism, which will do more than anything to drive down interest rates in this country.
Would you vote for a federal law banning abortion?
Look, I'm one of the most pro-life members of the United States House of Representatives, 100% pro-life voting record. Nobody's talking about a federal ban at the federal level. We have a very strong law at the state level in Indiana, which I fully support. When Roe v. Wade was struck down by the Supreme Court, the Indiana legislature was the first state in the country to pass a pro-life law after the Dobbs decision. I fully support it. At the federal level, aside from a national abortion ban is not going to happen. President Trump has made that very clear. If he's the president, there's not going to be a national abortion ban, and Congress won't be voting on it. But what I do think Congress can do is pass laws like saving babies after a botched abortion. The Born Alive Infant Protection Act is something that the House passed this year. The Senate is controlled by Democrats and didn't allow it to move forward.
You've called for reinstating the Trump-era Remain in Mexico policy for asylum seekers. What about those who are already in the country unlawfully?
We should send them all back to where they came from.
Is that feasible to send them all back?
I think it's totally feasible. Mass deportation of illegals. Today we have the conservative estimates say 15 to 20 million illegals who have come into our country since Biden and Kamala Harris have become president and vice president. And that's astonishing. What adding twice the population of the state of Indiana illegally into our country, flooding into our country in a short period of time, what that's done to America. So mass deportation of illegals is something that I fully support. In the vice presidential debate, I thought vice presidential candidate and Senator J.D. Vance did a great job of describing what the Trump plan would be for mass deportation that I support. Start with the criminals first. I mean, we have thousands of illegal criminals who have committed violent crimes in this country, and they should all be immediately deported and sent back to the countries where they came from. So start with the criminals, but then also tighten the rules in this country that create an incentive for illegals to come here in the first place. Crack down on companies who hire illegals, take away the job opportunities that are being taken away from American citizens by illegals. If you crack down on those entities that are employing illegals, then a lot of those illegals are going to go home on their own. But I support a full mass deportation effort, and when I'm Indiana's next United States Senator, I'll be on the front lines of fighting for it.
You alluded to this earlier, the $35 trillion national debt, and you said we need to get our spending under control. What cuts specifically would you like to make in order to get that under control?
Well, I think first and foremost, simply go back to pre-pandemic spending levels, and that will put us on a better path. So right now, we are still spending at pandemic spending levels. The government budgets have all increased substantially during the pandemic, but then they were never brought back to where they were pre 2021. So that would be an adequate way to get us started down that path. But I'm for across the board discretionary spending cuts of every federal department, whether there's a 1% cut or whatever that might be. The federal government is bloated all across the board. I mean, it happened even in a bigger way during COVID, but a 1% across the board spending cut of all federal agencies will put us on a path to do that. But really, this isn't that hard. It just takes lawmakers in Washington from both parties to come together and say, we have a crisis of $35 trillion national debt. We're spending almost $1 trillion a year to just pay the interest on the debt, and we got to do something about it.
All right, coming up, we turn to the Democratic candidate for Senate, Valerie McCray. Welcome back. Clinical psychologist Dr. Valerie McCray is carrying the Democratic banner in the Senate race. She tells our Garrett Bergquist it's time to put someone with character in the Senate.
I'm running for Senate because I have to. I'm running for Senate because this is just such an important time, and we have to have someone in the Senate that represents the people. I'm a psychologist by trade, everyone knows that, and it's important to have a mental health lens in Washington at this, especially at this particular venture, yes.
You've called affordable housing a right and a necessity, and the cost of housing has become a major issue in this campaign. What's your plan to increase housing affordability?
Well, one, we're going to have to build more. That's one thing. But also, we have to do something about how the hedge funds are eating up all of the housing. So I don't know if you've had this experience or not, but I'm a homeowner, and people keep calling me about selling my home. They're gathering up all these houses, and then they're reselling them at a much bigger price. They're pricing out our average homeowner. So that's a problem, because we have to have property. That's where people pass down their inheritance to their children. So we have to have property so people can buy and purchase, not to mention the fact that rents are extremely high as well. So we have to have places for people to live, and we have to move towards that as quickly as possible.
How do you plan to fight inflation?
You know, inflation, United States is really the lowest on inflation after COVID. So we have to stop, for one, perpetuating a myth that somehow United States have more inflation than other countries. In fact, we are the lowest. We just have to make sure that our policies moving forward are in line with what we need. Right now, we are in a process of making sure we get jobs here. We're making sure we have the infrastructure here, making sure we have those things, the basics, so that we can build on that. So for one, inflation has not been an issue here in the United States. It feels that way, but according with the rest of the countries, we're very, very low on that. And we've been doing a great job. The Biden administration has been doing a great job of keeping that down.
You've called for a federal law to guarantee access to abortion services. Should there be a gestational age limit?
No. And the reason why, I trust women and their doctors to determine when, if, and how that happens. Women are smart enough to make their own decisions. When you get into some sort of limit, you are making that decision for that female, for that woman, for that family. Most abortions happen very, very early on, and very, very rarely are in the cases are the late terminations, and those are usually medically sound decisions that the families are having to make. So we don't want to keep feeding into this dialogue that says that, you know, babies are being killed and all this stuff. That's not the case. It's never been the case. And I trust women to make those decisions.
On immigration, you've called for expedited work permits and a fairer and more efficient asylum process. What shape might those take?
Well, you know, I went to the border. We looked at the wall. I know that I watch people sleeping on the other side, waiting for their appointments. Here on the other side of the wall, people are waiting years to get the documentations they need to be able to work and do those things and be part of society. We just need to speed along the process. The Biden administration, they put together, and this was in collaboration with the Republicans as well, was a bipartisan bill. And because Trump wanted to keep this as a campaign topic, he blocked it. And that's unfortunate because we could be moving forward on this. It's already been laid out. Everyone agreed to it. We just have to move forward on making sure that bill gets passed.
Should we limit how many people we consider for asylum? I mean, we saw the huge crowds at the southern border earlier in the Biden administration.
I think that we have to, as a nation and as a global society, we're going to have to come together with other nations and figure out how we're going to move people around. People are going to be migrating based on weather, based on war situations. People have always migrated. I think that in collaboration with these different countries, we can figure out how many we can accept, how many we have the resources for, because the main thing is to make sure that when they do come, that we can treat them humanely, that we can treat them kindly, that we can welcome them in a way that has dignity and that has the best prospects for them to prosper and do well here, like the rest of Americans that have gotten here.
Our national debt is now at $35 trillion and climbing. What's your plan to fix that?
We need to tax differently. For the last several years, we've been taxing the poor and the working class, and we have been letting the ultra rich get by with not paying their fair share of taxes. When we do that, we will balance that budget. It'll be a lot closer to what it was before. Democrats historically have balanced the budget. We go into these situations whereas we grab it back at a crisis point and we get it fixed. And then they get the Republicans back in and they give all the money back to their ultra rich. We have to do something about that trend of giving everything at the top, expecting it to come down to the bottom, which we know it does not. We have to tax fairly. It's ridiculous how we're taxing the poor, the working class, the middle class to death. And we're letting the upper classes, the very top echelon just get by with not paying any taxes at all in some cases.
All right, coming up, Libertarian Senate candidate Andrew Horning explains why he wants to be your voice in Washington. Welcome back. A familiar face returns to the Libertarian ticket this year. Andrew Horning is a longtime Libertarian who has previously run for both senator and governor. He says the current two-party system is corrupt and doesn't serve voters well.
Anytime I've ever run for office, I'm the only constitutionalist running in that slot. And I'm the only one who can actually challenge the crony network that we know is corrupt. And, everybody says this two-party system is divisive. We know that it's tearing us to bits even within families. We know that the money in politics is ridiculous and has strings attached to it. And I'm the only one who can challenge any of that. And I've been opposing this for 30 years now. And I'm actually the only one actually even running for the constitutional role of US Senate, because nobody else is in any way, offering to protect Indiana from federal encroachment. And that was the whole point of the bicameral Congress in the US Senate.
The economy is playing a big role in this election, especially inflation and the cost of housing. What's your plan to address those two issues?
Well, for a long time, there are a lot of people, not just Ron Paul, not just the founders, everybody in between has been warning against having a central bank. So the Congress is supposed to be in charge of the Treasury, supposed to be in charge of our monetary system. They delegated that to the Fed, and the Fed is inherently inflationary. And if you look up certain, there are things like the Trippin paradox, and there are lots of terms for why it is that this is a transgenerational theft scheme, which inherently it basically takes from the lower and middle classes and gives to what we call the investment class, which also happens to be the donor class. And that is where an awful lot of our problems originate. And it's basically what the Fed does is it monetizes political debts. It's what they considered necessary for modern warfare before World War I, because it allowed you to run big deficits with a hidden tax of inflation.
What's your plan for the southern border?
If we were to do just a few simple things, make it easier to get here the right way, we, of course, have to secure the border. I mean, just the amount of disease and slavery and so on that's coming across, drugs coming across the southern border, that's ridiculous. But, as much as, there's tough talk from the Republican side about being mean against, getting tough against all these illegal aliens, it's really been our fault that we have been doing this to ourselves, blowing up other countries, making their other nations inhospitable, making them want to come here because they have to. We've made it, almost impossible for people to compete with legal labor because our labor laws are ridiculous. And everything we've done from the federal side has been encouraging people to come here.
Would you support a federal law either banning or protecting access to abortion services?
While governments, here's the big problem. Governments have never been able to stop abortion. I am pro-life. I am pro-life in every respect, anti-war, the whole schmear. But when it comes to whether it actually works, nations that have more access to abortion generally have lower abortion rates. Abortion rates have been dropping in the United States. Now, I am absolutely opposed to using taxpayer money for abortions. So I don't believe there should be any taxpayer support of either Planned Parenthood or UNESCO, which actually promotes abortion, funds abortions in other countries like China. So I am absolutely opposed to funding abortions from the federal level. Now, I don't believe in a federal ban, however, because that's not even in the federal realm. Murder isn't even a federal crime. That's a state-level crime. So this should all be at the state level. And so I am glad that Roe was thrown down, and I do not want to see anything like that at the federal level.
Since you brought it up, what's your plan for getting the national debt under control? The official figure is $35 trillion and climbing.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously we have to stop spending so dang much. The fact that we are funding both sides of every conflict on the planet, we arm and train our enemies, we're sending foreign aid to places that we do not have that money. So, whatever good intentions are behind the bleeding of money for illegal aliens and foreign countries and war, we don't have the money. And if we were at all serious, we would be acting like humans with our own budgets. And we would say, we have to cut stuff. We have to cut Netflix. We have to cut, we can't buy a new car. Our country can't give money to other countries. We can't keep spending so much on the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about.
So to be clear, so you would advocate cutting foreign aid as well as military spending?
Absolutely.
What about Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security? Those are some of the biggest chunks of the whole budget. Then you've got all the discretionary.
So if we cut enough, we can keep the promises we've made with Social Security and Medicare, but we will have to change the way we fund it. Because we're losing population, people are not having babies like they used to, fertility rates are dropping. And the funding for Social Security and Medicare depend on a growing population. We have to change the way we fund it, and some people have advocated phasing it out over time, replacing it with a different kind of system. But nobody is serious, on the Libertarian side anyway, about cutting benefits the way Republicans and Democrats are. They are already talking about how by 2035 we have to reduce benefits. And they're basically saying, with inflation being what it is, we're drastically reducing reducing benefits for Social Security. And that's on the way right now, and nobody's doing anything to stop that. So only libertarians really have been proposing a means to keep our promises with Social Security and Medicare while finding new ways to fund those promises.
Thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics this week. We'll be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30. If you would like to hear more from the candidates on this week's show, check out our All Indiana Politics podcast online right now at wishtv.com. Have a great rest of your weekend.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Watch All Indiana Politics live Sunday mornings at 9:30 on Wish TV and at wishtv.com. Subscribe to this podcast and listen weekly here on the All Indiana Podcast Network. And be sure to discover even more great podcasts at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.